series last week, and that was about players you shouldn't overreact to, shouldn't tilt about. Hopefully you read that. If not, go back and read those 2 articles. These next 4 weeks, we're going to be talking about incredibly true statistics. So each year, we have players that kind of defy what we thought was going to happen, defy logic. And so I'm going to try to bring you some of those. I know the season's pretty early, but we're going to try to bring you some of those. I'm going to break it into 4 parts. So quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. Today's going to be the quarterback section. So also I want to mention that this isn't going to be a blind player comparison. I'm not going to do any blind player comparisons, but I'm going to use some of the styles, the writing styles, and the tools that I use for those articles. So hopefully you like it. Hopefully you have as much fun reading them as I do writing them. So let's jump into it. First quarterback I want to talk about is Tom Brady. Tom Brady, he's the QB1 after 3 weeks. He holds the top spot by more than 77 fantasy points. Doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're talking about that upper echelon, that number 1 quarterback, it is quite a bit. I admit that seeing Brady, in the top, at least top 3, even top 1, isn't that big of a shock. He's on one of the best offenses in the league, and he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So the thing that surprised me the most is how he played against the Rams in week 3. So Rams are a top 3 defense, maybe the best defense. It's debatable, but they're a top 3 defense, and Brady just had a great fantasy finish. The Bucs were defeated. The Rams were in control pretty much the entire game, but Brady still had a great fantasy game. It was his 3rd consecutive game with over 37 fantasy points. So he didn't have a particularly strong game, Brady, that is, when it came to scoring touchdowns, but he made up for that with total passing yards. He had 432 passing yards. We know that in Dynasty Owner, if you get over 400 passing yards as a quarterback, you get 4 bonus points. So very impressive there. The fact that he did this against the Rams defense gives me no question that he should be started. You might not have that question anyway, but he should be started in every Dynasty Owner league, for the foreseeable future. Matchups are not a concern really for me much at all anymore. So up next, Derek Carr. Derek Carr has very quietly become the QB6 in Dynasty Owner. He's averaging 32.5 fantasy points per game, and he's averaging 2 touchdowns per game as well. So what's the most impressive, I think, and the thing that stunned me the most is that, Carr leads the league in passing yards, but he also leads by 116 passing yards. Just a crazy number to be ahead of second place. He's averaging 401 passing yards per game. Something I didn't expect. I don't think most people expected from the usually, run-heavy, lower passing volume Raiders, but he's getting it done. Carr finished QB14 last season. He's already totaled more than 1/4 of his passing yards all of last season in these first 3 games. So amazing. He's on a career best pace. Hope he can keep it up. The other thing I want to mention is that he is a rock solid value. You might not think about it like that, where he's $25 million per year, but of the top 6 quarterbacks in Dynasty Owner, only 1 has a cheaper salary than Carr, and that's Kyler Murray at $9 million. So depending on the matchup, I think Carr may have graduated to some owners' starting lineups. Either way, he should be for sure a bench quarterback, should be owned in most leagues with that value at $25 million. Daniel Jones, Sam Darnold, I kind of lumped them together in the same segment here. So they both came into the 2021 season as wild cards, at least in my opinion. Both struggling quarterbacks. They're both on poor teams. Coming close to the end of their rookie contracts, we know that Darnold only has 1 year left. Daniel Jones has 2 more. And also they were missing their top 5 running backs last year. Jones was missing Saquon with the season-ending injury, and then Darnold was missing McCaffrey. McCaffrey only played 3 games last year. So in the 3 games so far in the 2021 season, both are playing above expectations. Daniel Jones is QB12. Sam Darnold is QB13. Jones is a little more of a shock for me just because, I was a little high on Darnold, probably higher than most coming into this season. Regardless, both good fantasy football options. Probably more in the bench quarterback area. Darnold might be starting to creep up, at least for me in the starting, but that remains to be seen. As I said, continue to start them with confidence as at least your bench quarterback. And, they can jump up into the starting lineup depending on their matchup. Taylor Heineke, I want to talk about him. So we know that Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's going to be out for quite a while with hip injury. Very disappointing. But with that disappointment comes a big priceless opportunity for Heineke. And he's taken advantage of it so far. So far this season, he has 223 yards per game, 2 touchdowns per game, 15 rushing yards per game. Not a lot, but, you get 1.5 points per game, additional rushing. So that's very nice. And that adds up to 22.2 fantasy points per game. Good for QB18 on the season. Heineke only cost you $2.375 million. It's the 3rd lowest salary of any quarterback inside the top 20. Good value, very good value. Bench quarterback right there. I wouldn't dare put him in my starting lineup, but a very good low salary bench quarterback candidate. And finally, let's talk about Aaron Rodgers. So this is where we get to the bad part. So Rodgers is currently QB 20 on the season. There's really no way to sugarcoat it. As far as Rodgers goes, for his standards, for our standards at Dynasty Owner, he has been bad. But there's hope. So in his 3 games this season, he's averaging 21.2 fantasy points per game. Not great. You want more than that from, a $33.5 million quarterback. But if you remove week 1 entirely, he's averaging 31.5 fantasy points per game. Now, I'm not in the habit of trying to just, throw away stats because they matter. They happened. We can't just get rid of them. But his 0.6 fantasy points that he had in week 1 against New Orleans, I'm going to go on a limb and say that's not going to happen again. This is going to be considered an extreme outlier game by the end of the season, and I doubt he has a game anywhere close to as bad as that one was. Yes, Rodgers is barely hanging on to the top 20 quarterbacks. He is the 5th most expensive quarterback in Dynasty Owner, $33.5 million, as I said. I'm disappointed too. If I owned him, I don't own him in any Dynasty Owner leagues, but I would be very disappointed. I mean, he finished quarterback 2 in 2020, so there's a lot of room for disappointment here. But be patient. It goes back to my first 2 articles I wrote. Don't tilt on this, and I would have put Rodgers in this if I could have. Do not be worried about it. At the end of the season, I would be willing to make a bet with anybody who wants to take the bet that Rodgers will still be a top 10 quarterback. He might not be the biggest value at that spot. If he finishes QB9, QB10, it's not going to be great value for a player that's, a top tier salary, top end salary, but he's still going to give you those productive games to keep you competitive within your league. So don't panic. Stick with Rodgers. I would feel comfortable starting him as my quarterback, at least for this foreseeable future. So that pretty much wraps up what I want to talk about. Next week, we're going to talk about running backs, incredibly true stats for running backs. Hope everybody tunes in then. And also go ahead and read my article that pairs with this video. Also follow us on Twitter at Dynasty Owner. Follow me on Twitter at Dynasty Owner. I'm at Dynasty Jerk. And then subscribe to us on YouTube as well. That really helps us out a lot. So I appreciate everybody listening. Take care and be safe.